The city glowed like molten gold below the penthouse windows, its skyline glittering beneath the weight of 1,000 ambitions. Inside the party was everything you would expect from the top floor of power: sleek suits, clinking glasses, and the subtle scent of money and perfume. Elena Vance stood at the center of it all, like she belonged because she did. At just 32, was one of the most formidable women in real estate. A self-made millionaire, the face of a wildly successful property empire, and a regular headline feature in every major business publication. Her long blonde curls fell in perfect waves past her shoulders, and her silver silk gown shimmered like liquid fire with every step she took. People parted when she walked by, not out of fear, but awe. "Elena, we need your eyes on the acquisition model," someone said from the crowd. "Elena, your Forbes cover just went live." Another chimed in. "Champagne," a server offered. She accepted. The glass smiled like a queen and raised it mid-conversation, the picture of effortless success. No one noticed how tightly her fingers gripped the flute. No one saw the way her smile faltered when no one was looking. No one knew about the soft, irregular thump in her chest that had become more frequent in the last few months. She hadn't told anyone, not her assistant, not her doctor, not even herself. Not really, because Vance didn't have time to be weak. But tonight, the music felt too loud, the lights too sharp, and her chest too tight. She excused herself with a graceful nod and moved quickly through the crowd, her heels silent against the marble floor. She wasn't going to cause a scene. She just needed air. A moment as she neared the elevator at the far end of the hall, her vision wavered, edges of the world softening like wet paint. The elevator doors came into view. She focused on them like a lifeline. 10 more steps. 5. Her grip tightened on the champagne glass. Her heart thudded faster, then skipped. She reached out toward the call button, and the world disappeared. The glass slipped from her fingers and shattered against the floor. Her body collapsed in a slow, terrifying fall, crumpling near the elevator as voices in the distance gasped. "Elena!" someone cried. "Call 911, another shouted. But Elena Vance, queen of the room, just moments ago, lay unconscious in a puddle of golden glass, her empire spinning far, far above her. Morning light crept weakly through a narrow window, cutting across the dusty floor. The first thing felt was the cold, not the sterile chill of a hospital, but something raw, the kind that seeped up from concrete floors and clung to the air like memory. Her eyelids fluttered. The world came back in fragments. The hum of fluorescent lights, the scent of engine oil and old metal, and the faint crackle of a space heater somewhere nearby. Then a voice, soft, curious. "Are you a plane princess?" Elena blinked. A small face hovered inches from hers, round cheeks, wide hazel eyes, and a crooked ponytail tied with a mismatched ribbon. The little girl, maybe 5 years old, wore a pink dress smudged with oil and clutched a toy screwdriver like it was a doll. "I what?" Elena murmured, her voice dry. "You were sleeping like Snow White, but in a car place." "I thought maybe you flew here," the girl whispered seriously. "Daddy says only special people end up here by accident." Elena struggled to sit up. Her head throbbed, her body sluggish. A worn leather couch creaked beneath her. A gray blanket was tucked around her shoulders, and a half-empty bottle of water rested beside her. She was definitely not in a hospital. "Where am I?" she asked, panic flickering in her chest. The girl beamed. "Daddy's garage. He fixed you." "Fixed me," Elena echoed, eyebrows lifting as if summoned. A shadow moved in the doorway. A tall man stepped in, wiping his hands with a shop rag. He looked about 35 with tousled brown hair, a faint grease smudge on his jaw, and calm eyes that didn't flinch when they met hers. "Morning," he said quietly. "You fainted. I didn't know your name, no phone, no ID. So here we are." She stared at him, trying to piece together memory. The last thing she remembered was reaching for the elevator. "I was at a party," she said slowly. "Penthouse downtown." He nodded. "I was delivering some car parts to a client in the same building. The place was packed for that party upstairs. I saw you collapse near the elevators. No one moved. They just stared." Her mouth parted in disbelief. "And you? I couldn't leave you there." He shrugged. as if it were the simplest thing in the world. I tried calling hospitals, but the line was jammed. Figured getting you somewhere warm and quiet was better than the sidewalk. I could have paid for a private ambulance, she muttered more to herself than him. He didn't reply, just handed her a warm paper plate. It's a grilled cheese. My daughter insisted you'd wake up hungry. Elena looked down. A napkin rested beside the sandwich, steam curling upward. She hadn't eaten since. She couldn't remember. Across the room, the little girl had plopped herself beside a tool chest, now humming, while scribbling on a notepad with a stubby crayon. She glanced up and waved. I'm Lily Elena, she replied, then paused. It had been a while since she'd said her name, without it being followed by CEO Forbes, or for the investors. I'm Jack, the man added. A silence settled between them, not awkward, not yet familiar. Elena took a small bite of the sandwich. Her stomach, previously tight with nerves, loosened with the warmth. She looked around. The garage was cluttered, but clean. A faded calendar hung above a cracked window. A line of toy cars sat neatly on a shelf. It was all so normal. No cameras, no curated image, just a man, a child, and the kindness of a space that had no reason to welcome her. She looked at Jack again. Thank you, she said quietly, for helping me. He gave a small nod. People don't always need saving, but they always deserve care. And for the first time in a long while, Elena felt something she hadn't allowed herself to in years. Safe. The scent of motor oil still lingered in the air, but it didn't bother her as much this time. She reached for her clutch, checking her phone. Dead. Her eyes flicked toward the door. She stood, smoothing out the wrinkled fabric of her dress, and quietly made her way toward the exit. She wasn't used to lingering, especially not in borrowed blankets in someone else's world. Just as her hand touched the doorknob, a voice called out, "You don't have to rush." Jack stood by the tool bench holding a rag in one hand and a cup of something warm in the other. At least let me buy you a proper breakfast, one that doesn't smell like engine grease. Elena hesitated. She opened her mouth to decline, then paused. From behind a stack of tires, a curly-haired head popped out. Daddy said, "Today is waffle day." Lily grinned barefoot, wearing a pink dress slightly too big for her, her cheeks smudged with marker. Elena blinked. That small voice did something to her ribs. She nodded once. Waffles sound decent. The diner was a small building on the corner of a sleepy street, painted yellow with sunflower curtains in the windows. A neon open sign buzzed quietly above the door. Inside, it smelled of syrup and coffee. As soon as they stepped inside, a warm voice called out, "Well, look who it is, mister. I still don't know how to make an omelet." A stout woman in her 60s, dressed in a bright floral apron, sauntered up to them. "Hi, Martha," Jack said with an eye roll. Martha looked between him, the bouncing little girl, and Elena, still in her silver gown, under a borrowed denim jacket. She smirked. "You finally brought someone taller than 3FT. That's progress." Jack groaned. Elena raised an eyebrow. Martha winked. "Table by the window, honey." "You too, Missy," she added to Lily, who gave a toothy grin and ran ahead. They sat. Lily got a kid's menu with crayons. Jack ordered black coffee. Elena, still adjusting, nodded politely to everything. "You're not from around here," Martha said as she poured syrup. "Guilty," Elena replied. "I like your hair," Lily chirped, dragging her crayon across a paper placemat. Elena smiled. "Thanks. I pay someone a lot to make it look like this," Lily giggled. After a few minutes, when Lily wandered to another booth to color with a local kid, Elena turned to Jack. "Her mom?" she asked gently. His smile faded. "She passed right after Lily was born. Complications." He took a slow sip of coffee. "I was studying mechanical engineering. Big dreams. But my mom got sick, and suddenly I had a newborn. I left the program, started fixing cars closer to home." Elena didn't reply immediately. She simply nodded, staring into her cup. She understood sacrifice more than she admitted, just not the kind that came with lullabies and baby formula. Jack broke the silence. "You." She gave a half smile. Parents gone early. Built everything from scratch. The company, the pressure, the headlines. She paused. No one ever tells you success can feel like a cage with glass walls. Their eyes met across the syrup-sticky table. Outside, the city buzzed back to life. On the drive back to the city, traffic suddenly snarled beneath an overpass. A weekend street fair had popped up overnight. Colorful tents, balloons, laughter. Jack looked over. Looks like fate wants us to walk. Elena scoffed but smiled. They got out. Lily tugged Elena's hand toward a booth with a sign. Quick portraits? $5. Come on, the girl beamed. Elena sat feeling strange without a boardroom or camera flash in front of her. 10 minutes later, the artist handed her the drawing. She stared. There she was, hair loose, face soft, no makeup, dressed in a white button-up, sitting in the sun beside a girl holding a screwdriver. She looked free. Not very CEO, she murmured. Jack peered over her shoulder. Maybe not, but definitely real. She held the drawing close. Later, back at her tower of steel and glass, Jack dropped her off at the entrance. Before leaving, Lily pulled a sticker from her tiny backpack, a tiny spark, and pressed it into Elena's hand. If you're ever sad, she said solemnly, stick this on your heart. It'll remember how to turn again. Elena laughed, soft, real, almost shy. It was the first time in a long time anyone had heard her laugh like that. The elevator ride to the top floor was silent, reflective, just like the walls. When the doors opened, her assistant greeted her with a folder and a flurry of updates. Your weekly schedule's been realigned. First board meeting is at 10:00. PR is waiting for final approval on the campaign visuals. Also, the quarterly investor call's been moved up. Elena walked as she listened, but everything felt like noise. Background music to a life she had once written, but no longer felt part of. She sat at her desk, glass, spotless cold, and stared at the skyline through the floor to ceiling windows. Something inside her didn't fit here anymore. She could still hear Lily's tiny voice echoing in her head. Just because the gear's not turning doesn't mean it's broken. That afternoon, a logistics assistant knocked on her office door. Ma'am, something was dropped off for you downstairs. No return name. Curious. Elena took the slim parcel and opened it carefully. Inside was a small laminated sketch, her and Lily, side by side, on a bench at the fair cotton candy, in their hands, hair blowing slightly in the breeze. In the bottom left corner, a tiny spark sticker. No signature, no note, just that. Elena smiled, the first real one all day. The next evening, as twilight painted the city in golden haze, Elena pulled her sleek car onto the familiar cracked pavement of a tiny garage on the edge of town. She stepped out in a beige silk dress, her hair in a neat bun, and knocked on the office door. Jack appeared, a wrench in one hand, eyebrows raised. My brakes are making a weird noise, Elena said casually. Can you take a look? He gave her car a quick glance. This model? You had a full service 3 weeks ago. She shrugged. Maybe I'm paranoid. If it's nothing, I'll head out. He tilted his head, then gestured her inside. Come on in. From the corner, Lily spotted her and jumped up from her coloring mat. The airplane princess is here. Elena laughed, her voice warmer than she expected. While Jack worked under the hood, Elena wandered to the back of the garage, where a small wash sink stood against a wall. She had touched part of the car earlier, and her fingers still smelled like oil. She turned the rusty faucet. A loud clang. Then whoosh! The pipe burst sideways, shooting cold water in a wild arc straight onto her. Ah! She gasped, backing away as the water soaked her dress, the silk clinging immediately to her skin. Footsteps pounded. Don't touch it, Jack called, rushing in. He ducked under the spray and turned the valve off manually, water still dripping from his arms. Behind him, Lily peeked in, eyes wide. Daddy always gets sprayed by that one. You're just like him. Elena stood there, dress plastered to her legs, clutching the wet fabric to her torso. Her hair clung to her cheeks. I think I just made your worst customer list, she muttered, flustered. Jack held back a grin. No, but you're definitely the most dramatic. He stepped out for a second, then returned holding a clean towel and a crisp white shirt. This is the driest thing I've got. There's a bench behind that curtain if you want to dry off. Elena nodded, cheeks pink. She disappeared behind the divider. When she came out, a few minutes later, the shirt hung loosely on her, too long in the sleeves, too short on the hem. Her long legs were bare below it, and her hair was slightly towel-dried and falling out of its bun. She looked nothing like the CEO who had walked in. She looked younger, softer, more real. Jack didn't stare, didn't make a joke. He simply returned to tightening a bolt beneath the car, pretending not to notice the blush that lingered on her face. Lily, however, did notice. You look funny in Daddy's shirt, she announced proudly. But kind of pretty, too. Elena couldn't help but laugh, biting her lip. Thanks, I think. And for a moment, with her soaked dress hanging near the fan and the borrowed shirt still warm with someone else's scent, she didn't mind being just another gear in someone else's world, spinning not for power, but for connection. It started with a photo. One grainy off-angle shot of Elena Vance stepping out of a shabby garage in the suburbs, hair loose face, flushed, wearing a white men's shirt slightly too big for her frame. It landed on a gossip blog, known more for clicks than facts, but it did not matter. The headline screamed, "Millionaire CEO and the Mechanic, the real story behind the penthouse collapse." Within hours, it was everywhere. Twitter threads dissecting the angle of her car door. TikTok speculating if the mechanic was her secret longtime lover, and Instagram polls asking if Elena had finally lost her edge. Some laughed. Some cheered for a Cinderella twist. Others, investors, analysts, corporate watchdogs, frowned deeply. By the time Elena walked into her 10:00 a.m. strategy meeting, her assistant looked pale. He pulled her aside before she reached the boardroom. You need to see this, he said, shoving his tablet forward. She stared at the headline. Her jaw clenched, but her voice remained even. And PR is in panic mode, he muttered. They're drafting a statement. The board's already requested a closed-door meeting. About my love life, she asked coldly. About the company's image, he replied, and the dip in pre-market shares. That afternoon, she sat at the long, glossy table in a room she once commanded like a queen. Now she sat across from men in sharp suits and one woman from investor relations whose tone was firm but diplomatic. We're not questioning your personal decisions, the woman said, but we are asking you to consider stepping back temporarily. A short leave just until things quiet down. And what if I say no? Elena asked. One of the men shifted uncomfortably. Then we'll have to vote on it. Elena said nothing. She simply stood and walked out. She did not drive to the garage. She did not reply to the text Jack sent the night before. Just 4 simple words. You okay out there? Instead, she buried herself in silence, in work, in a pile of unsigned documents that no longer felt important. Every corner of her penthouse felt colder now. The tiny spark sticker, once stuck near her bathroom mirror, had been peeled off during a fit of frustration she could not name. She missed the scent of oil and old coffee, missed the sound of tiny feet running across concrete, missed the way Lily would call her airplane princess, like it meant something more than just a title. 3 days passed. Then on a cloudy Thursday morning, as she sat flipping through a presentation she was no longer required to deliver, the front desk rang up. There's a delivery for you, Miss Vance. From who, no name. It's a pink envelope, handwritten. Elena blinked. When it arrived, it was slightly bent. Child-sized scrawl covered the front. For the airplane princess, don't be sad, okay? Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside was a folded sheet of notebook paper, covered in crayon drawings. 3 stick figures stood next to what appeared to be a flying car. One of them had wild curly hair. One had yellow scribbles for long hair. Between them was a heart drawn in bright red. At the bottom, in crooked pink letters, Daddy says, if you love someone, you have to believe them first. I believe you, Lily. Elena's breath caught. Her vision blurred as she read the line again and again. In the silence of her marble-lined apartment, with the hum of the city far below, Elena Vance, CEO, millionaire strategist, let the letter fall into her lap. And for the first time since the headlines hit, she closed her eyes not to shut out the world, but to remember the one that had briefly let her in. The rain had started quietly, just a soft tapping against the garage windows as Jack pulled down the metal shutter. He had just reached for the lock when a yellow taxi pulled up to the curb. He straightened, heart thudding once before he even understood why. The door opened. Elena stepped out. No designer coat, no heels, no entourage, just a soft gray dress clinging to her frame in the mist. Her hair pulled into a low ponytail, and in her arms, Lily's drawing edges slightly worn from being held too tightly. Jack froze, hands still on the shutter. She approached slowly, eyes never leaving his. "Hi," she said, voice quiet but steady. "You came back?" he replied, almost like a question. She nodded, then held up the drawing. "I couldn't stop looking at it." He opened the door again, without a word, and stepped aside to let her in. The garage smelled like rain and engine grease, like it always did. But something about her standing there again made it feel less like a workspace and more like a pause in time. Elena stood in the middle of the room, then finally asked, "Can I ask you something?" Jack leaned against the counter, wiping his hands with a rag. "Sure, if you were me, if the world wanted you to choose between an image you built for years and something that just started to feel real, what would you do?" He looked at her for a long moment, then answered, "I'd fix what's worth keeping like a good engine. But I'd stop pretending everything's fine when it's clearly not. A car that keeps stalling doesn't need a repaint. It needs someone honest enough to open the hood." She smiled, lips tight with emotion. "You always speak in metaphors." "I'm a mechanic." He shrugged. "That's what we do." Elena stepped closer. "So what if I wanted to start over? Not in a penthouse, not in front of a boardroom, maybe just at a roadside food stall. Would you have dinner with me?" Jack didn't smile right away. He simply looked at her, like she was something both familiar and brand new. Then he turned toward the rack, grabbed his jacket, and said, "Come on, I know just the place." 15 minutes later, the three of them were huddled under a small plastic awning beside a food truck that smelled of garlic and chili oil. Lily slurped noodles like a pro, sitting between them on a bench that wobbled slightly. Rain drizzled around them, the pavement shimmering with reflections from neon signs. Elena held a steaming cup of instant ramen in both hands. She took a bite, then coughed. "This is spicier than I expected." "I warned you." Jack chuckled. Lily grinned, mouth red from the broth. "I told Daddy I want to eat grown-up spicy, but he said only if I drink the milk too." Jack reached behind him and pulled out a small bottle of milk from the plastic bag beside his foot. He opened it and handed it to her. "1 spoon of spicy, 1 sip of milk. Deal's a deal." Lily nodded solemnly and sipped obediently. Elena watched them with a smile she could not hide. Then out of nowhere, she laughed. Not the polite chuckle of corporate events, not the guarded smirk for the cameras. A full, unfiltered laugh that startled even her. Jack turned toward her. "What's funny?" She shook her head, still grinning. "I think this is the best dinner I've had in years." He looked at her, rain softly falling around them, their hands warming on styrofoam cups. "Yeah," he said. "Me too." And between slurps, giggles, and warm silence, the chaos of the past weeks melted into something simpler. Maybe this was not where the world expected Vance to be. But in that moment, with a little girl who still believed in paper hearts, and a man who never pretended to be anything he wasn't, she knew it was exactly where she was meant to return. The conference hall was filled with lights and muted chatter. But Elena stood calmly at the podium, dressed in a soft blue blouse, her golden hair tied back simply. There was no corporate logo behind her, no branding banners, just a white backdrop with one phrase. Small gears, big dreams. I've spent a lot of years believing success meant building something flashy, something powerful. Elena began, her voice clear and warm. But lately, I've come to realize the smallest parts can carry the greatest weight. The crowd leaned in. This new scholarship, the Spark Initiative, is for the kids who dream of building, of fixing, of turning something broken into something working again. It's for the future engineers, the mechanics, the thinkers we overlook too often. She paused, then smiled softly. It's inspired by someone very small who once told me, just because a gear's not turning doesn't mean it's broken. There was no applause sign, no PR team pushing headlines, but the room went quiet in the way that mattered, the kind that meant people were really listening. Back in the garage, Jack sat on a stool with Lily curled up beside him, watching the live stream on his old tablet. Grease stained his hands, and her dress had smudges of red marker, but neither seemed to care. Lily gasped and pointed at the screen. It's her. Look, Daddy, that's her. Jack couldn't help smiling eyes lingering on the screen as Elena stepped down from the podium, her presence calmer than he'd ever seen. She's pretty, Lily added thoughtfully, and smart and not scared of dirt anymore. He ruffled her curls. She was never really scared, just hadn't found the right garage yet. A few days later, the familiar rumble of a certain car engine rolled up to the garage. Jack looked up from beneath a lifted hood as Elena stepped out, a small wooden box in her hands. This time she wore jeans. Her hair was in a messy ponytail. No press, no entourage, just her. I brought something, she said. He wiped his hands on a rag and walked over, eyeing the box curiously. For Lily, she added, opening it to reveal a mini sketch kit, small pencils, watercolor pans, tiny erasers shaped like rockets and cars. Nestled inside was a card with Lily's name written in bright pink ink. Jack raised his brows. She's going to lose her mind. I hope so, Elena said, smiling. She handed him a folded paper next, an official invitation on thick cardstock. Little Inventors Expo, he read aloud. They need someone to maintain the demo vehicles. They need someone who knows how to fix things the right way, she said. Someone with patience, with care. Jack looked up. You want me to do this? I do, Elena replied, but not because I need a mechanic. He watched her for a beat, then asked softly, Is this another contract? She shook her head. It's a door, she said. You can walk through if you want. No pressure, but I'd like it if you did. For a moment, the garage filled only with the quiet ticking of a cooling engine. Then Jack leaned against the door frame, nodding. I'll need to bring my assistant. Elena grinned. Good, because I already bought her a VIP badge. And from the office, they heard a small shriek of excitement, followed by the sound of tiny feet running toward the gift box. That tiny spark, it was turning just fine. The afternoon sun filtered softly through the backyard trees, casting golden patches across the grass. The house behind them was modest. White porch green shutters, a small wooden swing hanging from a low branch. It was quiet, peaceful, the kind of place where weekends felt like something you could hold in your hands. Elena stepped onto the porch, carrying a tray of freshly baked muffins. Her long blonde hair was tied high in a loose ponytail, a few wisps curling around her face. She wore a faded white button-up shirt, Jack's sleeves rolled up flour, smudged faintly across the front. She looked nothing like the woman who used to walk through glass doors in power heels, and she had never looked more at home. Across the yard, Jack crouched beside a half-dismantled toy Jeep tool scattered around him. Lily sat cross-legged nearby, handing him bolts, and pretending to read the instructions upside down. You sure this thing's street legal? Elena teased, stepping down the steps. Jack glanced up, a smirk, tugging at the corner of his mouth. Depends. Is the driver certified in bubble blowing and snack hoarding certified and licensed? Lily chimed in proudly. Elena placed the tray on the picnic table, then joined them on the grass. Lily immediately crawled into her lap, a muffin already in hand. You know, Elena said, unwrapping one for herself, if this consulting gig ever slows down, I think I've got a future in baking. Jack raised a brow. I think Martha would beg to differ. They all laughed. The laughter faded into a comfortable silence, the kind shared only by people who no longer felt the need to fill space with words. Then Lily looked up with her usual directness. Tomorrow's school? Do I go with Daddy or with you? The question hung in the air, light but not small. Elena looked at Jack. He met her gaze. No decisions were made out loud, but the answer was already known. She smiled and tucked a loose strand of hair behind Lily's ear. "Either's fine," she said softly, "as long as we're going together." Lily nodded, like that made perfect sense. Moments later, she leaned over to reach for a screwdriver, but dropped a toy screwdriver instead. It rolled across the grass and bumped gently against Elena's heel. She bent to pick it up. Jack looked over, and with a quiet smile said, "That suits you." Elena turned it in her fingers, the cool metal catching the sun. "Yeah," he nodded. "Feels like it belongs." She didn't look up when she answered, just smiled faintly and whispered, just like two gears that finally clicked into place. In the distance, wind rustled the trees. The backyard was filled with sunlight, the scent of muffins, and the soft hum of three hearts running in perfect sync. And somewhere deep in a small wooden toolbox, a tiny spark-shaped sticker still held strong. Maybe this story touched something inside you, a moment you lived, a feeling you once carried. If it did, share your thoughts or your own experience in the comments. And tell me where you're watching from so I can create more stories just for you.